Welcome to Team G503. I am your host Scott Schiller, and in this video we'll be removing the instrument cluster from a 1943 Willys MB. A lot of the wiring that's under the dash belongs to this instrument cluster, in which you have your speedometer, you have your fuel gauge, you have your oil pressure gauge, you have your temperature gauge, and you have your ampere gauge. And then you've got a pair of lights that illuminate those for evening driving. The first thing I'm going to do is reach back behind the cowl in the dashboard here, and there's a couple of wing nuts that are located at the top of a bracket that holds this in. And I won't be able to get underneath there and film how I do this, but I will show you the bracket when I remove it. Removing the speedometer will allow us a little bit better access at getting at the other gauges. And I've got these wing nuts going here in the back. There's the two wing nuts removed. After you've removed the wing nuts, the speedometer cable is threaded right into the back side of the speedometer. And in this case, I can take it off simply by hand. And if you can't get it by hand, you can reach up in there with a vice grip or a pair of pliers or something just to get it loose, but you want to be able to spin that off. And then you'll be able to remove your speedometer. Now that I've removed the speedometer, you can see the orientation of the actual bracket that holds the speedometer into the dashboard. And there's your speedo cable that we unscrewed right there. So I'll reach inside there and pull those out. So there's your bracket, and there's the back side of your speedometer. And you see where it's threaded, where the actual speedo cable goes on there. This bracket is oriented, your speedometer cable goes through the center of that slot in that bracket. And then your wing nuts would go here on these studs. And that's how that's oriented inside the dashboard. We'll look inside the spot where the speedometer is placed. And if you look in here, you look at the back of your ampere gauge, you'll see there's quite a few wires connected to the back of that. This one will be your temperature gauge. There's only one sending unit that goes through the firewall on that. On the driver's side, you've got your oil pressure gauge, and then you've got your fuel gauge. I'm going to remove the water temperature gauge and the oil gauge first and get those sending wires out of the way so I can get these top two. The oil pressure gauge is a mechanical gauge, and it actually works off of pressure that's through this line that comes from your engine block. So I'm going to have to remove this fitting first, and I'll do that before I loosen the bracket nuts. And this one's a pretty easy access. I'm just underneath the dash with a socket. Okay, I've got nut number 2 off. And there is little lock washers that you don't want to lose. Here's your oil gauge. And there's the bracket that holds it in. So just to show you the orientation, that sits inside your dash. On each one of these studs is a lock washer and a small nut. The temperature gauge is fastened to the dashboard in the same manner with a bracket and 2 nuts and lock washers, and you'll notice the lead to the sending unit that goes through the firewall and into the head of the engine. I removed the 2 nuts and lock washers from the back side here of the temperature gauge, and I'm going to pull this out, and I think you'll kind of laugh about this when you see the 6-foot lead that goes into the engine compartment. And if you think I'm kidding, here we go. Out it comes, pulling it through the firewall. Still more, and this is not correct, but there's the actual plug that goes into the head. Next, I'll be removing the fuel gauge, and there's this a little different this time because there's actually 2 wires that are connected here, one that supplies power to the gauge and one that actually goes to the sending unit in the fuel tank. The actual wire that supplies the power, if you look down inside the dash here, you'll notice it's connected to a circuit breaker on the support that goes to the firewall. I've removed the nuts and the lock washers from the back of the studs and taken the bracket off, and I want to turn this over and I want to show you something really important here. If you notice this spring contacts the back side of the actual fuel gauge and acts as a grounding unit to the bracket that actually is attached on the inside of your dashboard. And we've got some studs back here, and I'll show you how they're connected. We've got this wire here that goes to the sending unit, and that would go on to the stud. And this is the one that actually supplies power from the circuit breaker I showed you down in here. And how these are attached to the actual unit are, you've got a nut that you put on first, and put the nut down and tighten that bracket up. And then after that, you would actually take a wire and connect the wire, and then you would have a lock washer, and then you would have a nut that would complete that, and those would get tightened down so it would make a good connection. It's really, really important that that bracket makes a good ground contact to that dashboard. There again, we'll be talking about wiring the vehicle in the near future, but there's your fuel gauge. While I'm right here, and this is kind of in the way for the next video I'm going to be making, I'm going to go ahead and remove the lead and the wire that goes to the actual sending unit. It's actually strung through this bracket here on the side of the tub, and I should be able to just pull this out, and, well, should be. Nope, nope, nope. You know, this asphalt wire loom's all frayed and it's coming off, so we might have to pull this off a little bit. All right, there we go. It's tore right off there. It's all dry rotted and needs to be replaced for sure. So I'll just go down here and pull this loom off, and then I should be able to slip that wire through that bracket with no problem. And I'm going to save these wires. I like to save everything when I strip them off this old vehicles, and that way I can go back and when I match the new stuff up, or if I have a problem, you kind of compare. Don't ever throw anything away until you're finished with the project, and maybe not even then. So I'll wind this up and put it in the bag that I'll keep the rest of the wiring harness in as I remove it. And last but not least, the ampere gauge. And this is the fun one because there's a multitude of wires that are connected to those studs and the posts on the back side of this. So we'll have to be pretty careful about taking this off. I'll try to show you what's behind there as best I can when I remove it. So the ampere gauge is removed, and you can see here all the different circuits that pass through this. It's quite a few. And again, the way it was fastened is one nut holds in the bracket to the back side of the dash, and then your wires go on, and then a lock nut, a lock washer, and another nut. And I won't be discussing all the different circuits that do pass through this. We'll be doing that when we actually rewire the vehicle, but for now I just wanted to let you know that there is quite a few that goes there, and it can be a little frustrating when you remove it. Just be patient with it and try not to tear anything out. I'll be pulling these out and trying to label them. Some of these are not supposed to be here. A different ignition was set up on this particular vehicle, but I will be labeling these and pulling these back through the firewall probably in the next video. The lamps that illuminate the gauge cluster are simply pressed in to the dashboard. You can see the ears there. And these have been rewired. And there's a clip underneath here, just a fastener that someone's put in. So I can easily take those out. Those are modern. That's not the correct way it's supposed to be. But we'll just take both of these out. There again, there's that fastener. All the gauges have been removed, and the illumination lamps. And last but not least, I think I should get away with this. Whoever put this tape on here, max 45 mile an hour. That is not new old stock, and I'll be removing that. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We are disassembling and reassembling a 1943 Willys MB. You can follow us on YouTube. The channel username is Team G503. We'd love to have you. Thank you for watching. Keep it safe and happy Jeeping.